Before we start, I just want to clarify that I don't own any of these intellectual properties, and I've taken some creative liberties just to tell a story. Thanks for watching. In a world not so different from our own, there exists a rift between worlds where summoners can recall the legends of champions. One of these myths is about Azir, who is supposedly so far beyond any conventional design that only Faker himself could pilot Azir at his full potential. Playing Azir is like wrangling a wild stallion. The second you get comfortable enough to try anything, it's like the character himself is fighting back. But why? In Shurima to the south, bordering both Mount Targon and Acacia, an empire whose namesake comes from the oasis that gave them life. Here, the Shurimans were instructed by the Celestials to build a monument called the Sun Disk. They succeeded, and the greatest mortals were transformed into god warriors, an aspect of mortal virtue. These Ascended fought against the Hellspawn from the Void. After Shurima repelled these monsters, it became the greatest empire the world had ever seen, using the might of the Ascended to take over the entire southern continent. It was at the peak of their empire that the last emperor, Azir, attempted the trial of ascension only to be betrayed by his sworn brother, Xerath. Azir was obliterated as Shurima fell to ruin, and Xerath became an Ascended instead. Renekton and Nasus, both god warriors themselves, were the only two able to fight back against the newly Ascended. It ended when Renekton managed to pin Xerath down, urging Nasus to close the tomb on top of them, and so Nasus buried them under the sands and exiled himself forevermore. Without purpose, the remaining Ascended lost their minds and became darkened, having to be sealed by the Celestials that gave them their sunborn powers in the first place. Then thousands of years after the fall of Shurima, Cassiopeia killed Sivir in search of the Sun Disk's power, releasing the Ascended back onto the world. Now Azir must face his greatest mistake, and put a stop to Xerath before it's too late. Once a slave and now an Ascended, Xerath would force the rest of the world to suffer as he had. He would do anything to get what he wants. Even though Xerath hasn't necessarily done anything with the Void, I wouldn't be surprised if he would use it as a means to an end, if not only to beat Azir, especially now that Ezreal has taken the tier of the goddess and unleashed the Void onto the world again. Although it's a bit sad because I feel like this storyline has been put on hold for a little while. There have been some references to Shurima across a bunch of different cinematics and storylines, but the actual tale itself hasn't been finished yet, and I can't wait to see what happens. I suppose that's my favorite part about video games. They have these ambiguous storylines, different plot points that all connect together in some way or another, but it's up to the player to make those interpretations themselves and come to their own conclusions. And sometimes the fan base adds to the storyline, and other times the ones running the show pick an ending that no one saw coming. Even here, we don't know what Zahan's doing. We don't know what he's thinking. We don't know what he plans to do after this. All we can see is Xin Zhao begging Zahan to save the world once more. And so he does, taking what's left of Xin Zhao and turning him into a reflection of what Zahan's Ascended form used to be, before fulfilling Xin Zhao's will and leaving Yunara with everything that he's ever taught him from the tip of his broken spear, before Zahan finishes off Arcane and leaves. The storyline continues with Yunara returning to Demacia to bring the Seneschal's spear back in tribute of Xin Zhao. She stays for the ceremonies before returning to the First Lands, leaving the rest up to Demacia, which is where season 2026 takes off. I'm not sure when, but it takes place sometime after the events of Arcane, with the Black Rose pulling the strings from behind the scene, and as the drama increases, we get closer and closer to knowing what the Black Rose wants. Demacia was built by the refugees, survivors of the Rune Wars. They ran and found their homes in a petricite forest where no magic could reach them, but wound up trapped between the mountains, adjacent to the Freljord and Noxus. Certainly harsh, but survivable compared to their other options. It's probably the best place to live in all of Runeterra, unless you're a mage. But I mean, who wouldn't be afraid of dragons? Or worse, risk another Rune War. I suppose this is where Demacia's justice comes from. Not the fear of mages themselves, but some domino effect way into the future that could destroy everything they know and love. And so they fight against it, as rigid as it might be. And that's what defined Demacian tradition. Their insular culture was designed to protect themselves. When other times are changing, Demacia needs to grow. Is it possible for their Prince Jarvan IV be able to pick up the Demacian standard and carry it far into the future with Demacian pride? Will his acceptance to magic be the downfall of his kingdom? If they're lucky, it might very well save them all.